She was just a quiet waitress, until one daring moment at a forgotten piano turned her whole life into a standing ovation. The restaurant was warm and elegant, with soft lighting and quiet jazz music playing in the background. People in suits and evening dresses sat at their tables, enjoying expensive meals and sipping wine. It was the kind of place where people came to celebrate, show off their money, or close business deals. Everything was clean, perfect, and calm. Emily, a young waitress with tired eyes and a gentle smile, moved quietly from table to table. She wore a plain black uniform, her hair tied back in a neat bun. She had been working at this restaurant for nearly 3 years, taking double shifts to earn enough for rent and to help support her younger siblings. Her life was simple, almost invisible to the guests who came there. To them, she was just the waitress. But behind those quiet eyes, there was a story, a past she didn't talk about anymore. That evening, a new customer entered the restaurant. His name was Charles Benton, a well-known millionaire who made his fortune in real estate and tech investments. He was the kind of man people noticed right away. Tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit, and always surrounded by noise. Tonight, he had 3 guests with him, all laughing loudly as they were led to the best table near the front. Charles liked to be the center of attention. He was used to people laughing at his jokes, doing what he said, and treating him like someone important. He enjoyed surprising people with big tips or wild challenges just for fun. That night, he was in a playful mood, and when he sat down and looked around, something caught his eye, a grand piano sitting quietly in the corner of the room. He turned to the manager and asked, "Does anyone play that thing?" The manager smiled politely. "Only on weekends, sir. Tonight it's not in use." Charles nodded, then continued with his dinner. As he chatted with his friends, laughing and enjoying his wine, Emily came to take their order. She spoke politely, writing down everything carefully, and then walked away. But as she passed the table again a few minutes later, humming a soft tune under her breath, something caught Charles's attention. "Hey!" he called out, waving his hand. "Waitress." Emily turned, a little nervous but still smiling. "Yes, sir." He pointed toward the piano. "That song you were humming just now? It was Chopin, wasn't it?" She blinked, surprised that he recognized it. "Yes, it was." Charles raised an eyebrow. "You know classical music?" Emily gave a small nod. "A little. I used to play when I was younger." His smile grew wider. "Well, that changes everything." His friends looked at him, confused. Charles leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment he was creating. "I'll tell you what," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I dare you to go over there and play something for us. That piano's just sitting there all alone. Show us what you've got." Emily's eyes widened. She shook her head quickly. "Oh no, sir. I can't. It's been years. I don't play anymore." But Charles wasn't done. "Come on," he said with a grin. "I'll give you $1,000 tip if you go play just one song." "Just one." The room got quieter. Some of the nearby diners started turning their heads. A few were already whispering. The idea of a waitress playing piano, it sounded funny, even strange. Emily looked down, embarrassed. She felt her heart racing. She didn't want to be the center of attention. She just wanted to finish her shift and go home. But the thought of that money made her hesitate. $1,000, it could help her pay overdue bills. Maybe fix the heater at home. Maybe even take her little brother to the dentist. Still, she stayed quiet. Her hands trembled a little as she clutched her notepad. Charles leaned forward. His tone became a little softer, but the playfulness remained. "It's just for fun, no pressure. If you don't want the money, that's fine. But I think you're hiding something. I think you used to be really good." Emily looked around the restaurant. Everyone was watching her now. Her manager gave her a small nod, silently saying it was okay if she wanted to try. For a long moment, Emily stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, without saying a word, she walked toward the piano. The sound of her footsteps on the wooden floor felt louder than normal. She could feel all the eyes on her. The conversations had stopped. Even the people who didn't know what was going on had turned to look. Charles sat back with a satisfied smile, as if he had just started something entertaining. Emily sat down slowly at the piano bench. She stared at the keys. Her fingers hovered above them, shaking just slightly. Memories started flooding back. Of her mother sitting beside her when she was a child, of music competitions, of clapping audiences, of the smell of chalk dust from her first music teacher's home. She remembered how music used to make her feel safe, alive, whole. She closed her eyes for a second, blocking out the restaurant, the people, the noise. Just her and the piano now. She took a breath. Her fingers pressed the first key. A soft, low note floated into the room, almost like a whisper. Then another and another. Slowly, the notes began to form a melody, simple at first, then more complex, growing like a flower opening its petals. The sound was gentle, yet full of emotion. Her hands began to move more confidently, faster, stronger. She was playing a piece she hadn't touched in years, something deep from her memory, something she loved. The room was silent. Forks were held midair. Wine glasses paused before lips. Even the chefs in the kitchen had peeked out. The music filled every corner of the restaurant, warm and beautiful and haunting. Charles blinked. His grin had faded. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was listening, truly listening. So were his guests. So was everyone. And Emily? She wasn't the tired waitress anymore. She had transformed into something else. Her back straight, her eyes closed, her hands dancing across the keys like they belonged there. Her body moved with the music, feeling every note. When the last chord echoed into silence, she opened her eyes. She looked up for a moment. There was no sound at all. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the entire room erupted into applause. A standing ovation. People were cheering, whistling, clapping like they had just witnessed something magical. Emily stood up slowly. Her face was pink with embarrassment, but her eyes were shining. She wasn't used to this kind of attention anymore. Charles walked toward her slowly, almost in disbelief. "That was incredible," he said, his voice softer now. "Who are you?" Emily just gave a small smile and said, "Just a waitress." But everyone in that room knew now she was so much more. And that night, because of a simple dare, her life quietly began to change. The millionaire had expected a funny little moment, but instead, he and everyone else had discovered a hidden star. That was only the beginning. Emily sat on the piano bench, her hands resting just above the keys, her heart pounding inside her chest. The grand piano in front of her looked familiar, yet distant, like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. All around her, the room was silent. Every customer, every waiter, even the chefs in the kitchen stood still. The sound of laughter and wine glasses clinking had disappeared. Only the hum of soft lights and the nervous beating of her own heart filled her ears. She had no sheet music, no preparation, no warning. But something inside her stirred, something she had buried deep years ago, under the weight of life, pain, responsibility, and work. That old feeling of magic, the one that music used to bring, was waking up again. With her eyes closed, Emily took a long breath. Her fingers slowly moved toward the piano keys, touching them like they were sacred. She didn't think. She just played. The first note was soft, almost like a whisper. A single sound that floated through the air, reaching every corner of the restaurant. Then came another, then more, forming a slow, gentle melody that wrapped around the room like a warm blanket. It wasn't loud, it wasn't showy, but it was beautiful. Emily had started playing one of her favorite pieces, Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a song filled with emotion, complexity, and strength. The kind of piece that not many people could play without years of training. Yet for her, the notes came naturally. Her fingers remembered the path like it was home. As she played, her body relaxed and her back straightened. Her movements became smoother, more confident. She wasn't the shy waitress anymore. She was something else now. A musician, storyteller, soul speaking through sound. The customers in the restaurant stood frozen, stunned. No one had expected this. They had seen a waitress with a notepad and tired eyes, and now she was sitting at the piano like a professional. Like someone born to do exactly this. One older woman near the bar had tears in her eyes. The couple holding hands paused and leaned closer, drawn in by the music. The servers stopped their work and lined up along the wall, mouths slightly open. Even the bartender turned down the music in the background, letting Emily's song become the only thing that could be heard. Charles Benton, the millionaire who had dared her to play, sat completely still. The wine glass in his hand was untouched. His guests were silent too. Their earlier amusement had vanished. This was no joke. This wasn't a little waitress trying to impress people. This was raw talent. This was rare. One of Charles's friends leaned over and whispered, "Who is she?" Charles didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Emily, his face showing something between confusion and admiration. He had made the dare expecting an awkward moment, or maybe a funny story to tell later. But what he got was a performance he would never forget. The music began to rise. Emily's fingers moved faster, stronger. The piano filled with power, like a storm building up. Her whole body moved with the rhythm. She was pouring every feeling, every memory, every moment of loss and hope into the keys. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was her life, told through music. She remembered practicing as a child until her fingers hurt. She remembered the applause from her first concert. She remembered her mother's smile when she finished a perfect performance. And she remembered the day everything changed. The accident, the hospital, the silence that followed. Music had stopped for her after that. Until now, the song reached its peak, loud and strong, like a heart finally speaking after years of silence. And then slowly it began to fade. The notes softened again, slower, gentler, quieter. Emily's hands moved more delicately now, as if saying goodbye to something precious. The last note was barely a whisper. A single sound that hung in the air for just a moment longer before disappearing. Emily slowly took her hands off the keys. Her fingers were slightly trembling. Her eyes stayed closed for a second more, then opened. She looked up, unsure of what would come next. For a moment, there was nothing. Silence, then someone clapped. A single loud clap, then another. Then suddenly, the entire room erupted. Applause echoed through the restaurant. People stood up, cheering, whistling, smiling with wonder in their eyes. The same people who had barely noticed her before were now on their feet, celebrating her. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was real, deep, emotional. They weren't just impressed. They were moved. Emily stood up slowly from the piano bench. Her cheeks were red. She looked overwhelmed, almost confused by the reaction. It had been years since anyone had clapped for her, since anyone had truly seen her, as she turned to walk back to her duties. Charles stood up from his chair and walked toward her. His usual confidence had changed into something more sincere. He looked at her with disbelief. That was... He started, then stopped. Words weren't enough. He finally said, "That was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard." Emily gave a small smile. "Thank you." "Where did you learn to play like that?" he asked. She hesitated for a moment, then quietly replied, "I used to play a long time ago." "Used to?" Charles asked, still stunned. "You play like a master." She nodded slightly, her voice calm. "I had to stop. Life got in the way." Before he could ask more, the manager came over, grinning from ear to ear. "Emily, that was incredible. Why didn't you ever tell us?" She shrugged. It didn't matter anymore, but now it did matter. Everything had changed. The guests began approaching her, one by one, to say thank you, to ask her name, to tell her how much the music meant to them. Some even tried to give her money, which she gently refused. All she had wanted was to finish her shift. Instead, she had reminded people what beauty sounded like. Someone had filmed her performance and was already uploading it online. Emily didn't even notice. She was still trying to understand what had just happened. Charles walked back to his table, but couldn't stop watching her. His thoughts were racing. He had met many talented people in his life, artists, musicians, performers, but something about this was different. This wasn't just talent. This was soul, heart, pain, and joy, all mixed into one. And it had come from someone who carried trays and cleaned tables. He looked at his friends. We just witnessed something we weren't supposed to. That night, the restaurant stayed open a little longer than usual. People didn't want to leave. They kept talking about the girl at the piano. The energy in the room had changed. Something magical had happened, and everyone could feel it. When Emily finally finished her shift, she sat alone for a moment before going home. She looked at the piano one more time, remembering how it felt to play again. Her fingers still tingled. Her heart still beat faster. She wasn't sure what would come next. She didn't know if this was just a one-time thing or the beginning of something new. But one thing was certain. The music inside her wasn't gone. It had just been waiting for the right moment to come back. And all it took was a dare. The restaurant was still buzzing with energy even after Emily's performance had ended. Guests were still talking about the piano, about the song, about the girl in the black uniform who had surprised them all. Some had already shared the video online, and others were asking the manager questions about her. But Emily tried to stay quiet, going back to clearing tables and bringing out bills just like she always did. She had no idea what storm she had just created with her music. Charles Benton, the millionaire who had dared her to play, was still sitting at his table, but his mind was not in the restaurant anymore. He couldn't stop thinking about what he had seen and heard. The image of Emily at the piano, her eyes closed, her fingers flying over the keys with such passion it stayed in his mind like a painting he couldn't look away from. He had spent millions on art, music shows, and concerts in his life, but nothing had touched him quite like that one performance. As she passed by his table again, stood up and gently stopped her. "Emily," he said, softer now. "Please, sit down for a second. Just 1 minute." She hesitated. "Sir, I still have work, please," he said again. "I won't keep you long. I just need to understand something." She looked at him for a moment. Then she sat down at the empty chair beside his table. Charles leaned forward. "Where did you learn to play like that? Be honest." Emily looked down at her hands, then slowly said, "I started playing when I was 6. My mom used to teach music. We didn't have much money, but she got me a second-hand keyboard. She saw something in me. She taught me every day after school." He listened, surprised by how quietly she spoke. "No show, no drama, just truth. I got really good," she said, almost like she was remembering a different person. "By the time I was 11, I was playing in school concerts and small competitions. By 13, I was winning state-level contests. People started saying I was a prodigy. I even got an invitation to audition for Juilliard." Charles nodded slowly. He could already see the headlines forming in his head. Waitress was Juilliard level. "Pianist, but," he asked gently. Emily took a breath. "But when I was 15, my mom got sick. Cancer. We didn't have insurance, and treatments were expensive. I stopped practicing. I spent my time taking care of her. She passed away." Within a year, Charles sat back, his face heavy with sympathy. Emily continued. "After that, there was nothing. Just bills. My younger brother and sister needed someone. I was 16 and had to grow up overnight. I found small jobs. Piano stopped being important." She smiled a little, but it was the kind of smile that carried sadness behind it. "Thought I had closed that part of me forever." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "That's a heavy load to carry." "I don't talk about it," she said. "Most people don't ask. I've learned not to expect anything." Charles was quiet for a few more seconds. He looked at her differently now, not like a waitress, not even like a performer, but like someone who had survived something impossible. "You were meant for more than waiting tables," he said softly. She looked at him with calm eyes. "I used to believe that too." He leaned forward, suddenly serious. "Listen to me. I don't make promises I don't keep. I've helped a lot of people in my life. Some deserved it, some didn't. But you have something rare, not just talent. You have soul. If you want, I can help you." She looked surprised. "Help me?" He nodded. "Whatever you need. A teacher." A new piano, auditions, college, you name it, I'll cover it. I'll open the doors. Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled again, gently, almost apologetically. "Thank you," she said. "That's kind. But I've been let down before. I've learned not to expect miracles." "I'm serious," he said. "I believe you," she replied. "But I have a life now, 2 jobs, a small apartment, a family to take care of. I don't have the freedom to chase dreams anymore." Her words hit him hard. She wasn't being dramatic. She was just being honest. That night, after her shift ended, Emily walked home alone. Her apartment was small and old, with thin walls and a creaky floor, but it was clean and full of love. Her younger siblings were asleep on the sofa, their school bags neatly lined up by the wall. She looked at them with a quiet pride. They were her responsibility, and she didn't regret it. Still, after everyone was asleep, she sat on the edge of her bed and let herself think. For the first time in years, she let her mind wander back to what could have been. The concert halls, the piano under her fingers, the applause. Could she really have been someone? Could she still be? The next morning, everything changed. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Text messages, missed calls, emails. Her friends, old music teachers, even people she hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. "Is this you in the video?" "You're all over the internet," I cried, watching you play. "You're amazing. Someone from Juilliard shared your video." Confused, she opened social media. There it was, a video of her at the restaurant piano. Over 1 million views, thousands of comments. "Who is this girl?" "Real talent. It's better than anything I've seen on TV." Some people had even added emotional captions. "Never judge a book by its cover. She deserves the world." Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. Her hands shook as she read the comments. People she had never met were calling her a genius, an inspiration. She didn't know what to feel. By the afternoon, news stations were calling the restaurant. Local papers were asking for interviews. A morning show wanted to feature her. Music. Bloggers were writing articles with titles like "The Waitress Who Broke the Internet with Her Piano Skills." At first, Emily felt overwhelmed. She didn't know how to deal with this kind of attention. She wasn't used to people watching her, praising her, or offering her things. For so many years, she had been invisible, just another girl trying to survive. Then Charles called. He didn't ask for anything. He just said, "Now the world knows. You're not just a waitress anymore." They saw it too. What I saw? Emily didn't say much. She still wasn't sure what to believe. Deep inside, something had shifted. That night, after dinner, her brother came to her. He was 14 now, quiet but smart. He had seen the video too. He hugged her tightly. "I always knew you were special," he said. She hugged him back, tears in her eyes. The next few days passed in a blur. She gave her first TV interview, nervous, polite, humble. She talked about her past, her mother, her love for music, and how she had almost forgotten who she was. The story touched millions. Offers started coming in. A famous music school offered her a scholarship. A producer from Los Angeles sent her an email asking if she wanted to record. A composer from Europe offered her private lessons. Even Juilliard sent her a letter inviting her to audition again, but with every offer, Emily hesitated. She still had bills to pay. Her siblings needed her. She couldn't just pack up and chase dreams while they depended on her. The world was opening up to her, but her feet were still stuck in reality. She spoke to her manager at the restaurant. He was supportive and proud of her, and he told her something that stuck in her mind. "You've carried others long enough, Emily. Maybe it's time to let someone carry you." Those words stayed with her. One evening, as she sat with her siblings, she told them everything about the video, the offers, the chances. She expected them to be scared or sad. Instead, they smiled. "We'll be okay," her sister said. "You've done enough. You gave up everything for us. Now it's your turn." Emily cried that night, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time in years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, it was okay to want something for herself. And so slowly, carefully, she began to believe again. Believe in the piano, in music. In her dream, the girl who once thought her future was lost was being given another chance, and this time she was ready to take it. Emily's days had completely changed since the night she played the piano at the restaurant. What started as a simple dare had turned her quiet life upside down.
Oh.
The world had seen her talent. People she never knew were talking about her, sharing her story, calling her gifted, brave, and extraordinary. But even though the world was cheering for her, Emily still felt unsure inside. She continued her job at the restaurant for a while, still clearing tables and serving dishes like before. But every time someone new came in, they stared at her as if they already knew her. Some smiled kindly, others whispered, or even tried to take photos. It felt strange. Before, she had felt invisible. Now, she felt exposed, even when she walked to the store or waited at the bus stop. Someone would recognize her from the video. They'd stop her and say things like, "You're that piano girl, right? Or you made me cry when I watched you play." At first it felt nice, but after some time it became overwhelming. Emily was not used to being noticed. She didn't know how to handle fame, even small fame like this. Meanwhile, her phone was full of messages. Famous musicians, talent scouts, school representatives, music producers, all trying to talk to her. Everyone wanted something. Some offered opportunities. Some offered money. Some just wanted to be part of her moment. She had never felt this kind of pressure before. For years, she had lived a simple life. Wake up, make breakfast for her siblings, work to shifts, come home, sleep. Now, there were choices, big choices, and they scared her. Charles Benton had also stayed in touch. Unlike others, he didn't push her. He would call sometimes just to check on her. He'd say things like, "Don't rush, Emily. But remember, this door might not stay open forever." He wanted her to take the chance to meet music professionals, to study again, to perform. But he also understood why she hesitated. One day, Charles arranged a private meeting for her with a retired concert pianist named Sophia Longston. Sophia had once been world famous, performing in the biggest concert halls. Now she taught students. In a quiet studio downtown, at first, Emily didn't want to go, but Charles gently convinced her. "Just talk to her," he said. Nothing more, so Emily went. The studio was small, but filled with sunlight and the smell of old books and polished wood. Sophia was in her late 60s, with silver hair and kind, sharp eyes. She listened patiently as Emily told her everything about her mother, her childhood, her dreams, her responsibilities, and how music had disappeared from her life. When Emily finished, Sophia said, "Music never leaves us, even if you stop. Playing for years, the music waits inside you. But you must decide, do you want to carry it again?" Emily looked down at her hands. "I don't know if I can." Sophia smiled. "You already have." That meeting changed something in Emily. For the first time, she started to think seriously about what her future could be, not just what her past had been. She went home and talked again with her younger siblings. They were both growing older. Now her brother had started working part-time. Her sister was applying for scholarships. They told Emily that they wanted her to chase her dream, that it was her turn now. Still, Emily had doubts. What if she failed? What if the world only liked her for a moment? What if she wasn't really as good as people thought? Late one night, she sat at the old keyboard in their apartment, the one her mother had bought for her when she was little. She hadn't touched it in years, but now. She opened the cover and pressed a key. It made a soft, broken sound, a little out of tune, but it still sang. She began to play quietly at first, afraid to feel too much.
How?
But soon the music started flowing. Her fingers remembered, her heart remembered. She played for an hour, then two. She didn't stop until the sun started to rise. After that night, Emily made a decision. She was going to take the chance. Charles helped her connect with a coach who specialized in preparing musicians for auditions. Emily began practicing again, spending hours each day at a real piano, one that Charles had arranged for her to use. At a friend's studio, at first it was hard. Her fingers were stiff, her timing was off, and she got frustrated easily. But Sophia had told her something important. Talent is only the beginning. The real work is what you do with it. Emily worked. Day after day, she practiced. Slowly, the music became smoother. Her fingers became faster. Her confidence started to grow again. She also began to accept invitations for small performances. A local university invited her to play at a student concert. She was nervous, her hands shaking before going on stage. But once she sat at the piano, the nerves faded. She played, and the audience loved her. Then came an email from a major concert organization in New York. They were holding a charity gala and wanted her to perform as a guest artist. Emily almost said no. The pressure felt huge, but Charles encouraged her, and Sophia told her, "You are ready." The night of the gala, she stood backstage in a beautiful blue dress, her hands clasped together, eyes closed. She could hear the crowd on the other side of the curtain, hundreds of people waiting. When the announcer called her name, she stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright. The grand piano stood waiting in the center. She walked slowly, sat down, and took a deep breath. This time, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. She began to play. The notes rose through the hall like sunlight through stained glass. Every note carried a part of her story, the pain, the sacrifice, the love, the loss, the hope. The music wasn't just sound anymore. It was who she was. When the final note faded, the silence was powerful, and then the sound of applause, loud, long, full of emotion. People stood up, clapping. Some had tears in their eyes. Others looked amazed. It wasn't just about how well she played, it was about the feeling she gave them. Something real, something deep. After the concert, a reporter asked her, "How does it feel to be discovered so late?"
Emily
smiled and said, "I was never lost. I was just busy surviving." Her words touched even more people. That night, she sat in her dressing room with her brother and sister beside her. They were proud, happy, and full of joy. "I told you," her sister said. "You were born for this." And Emily finally believed. It, the girl who had once played in silence, was now heard by thousands. The waitress who had been dared to play piano had become someone the world couldn't ignore. And this was only the beginning. The day had finally come. The air outside was cold, but clear, and the city lights sparkled like stars. Inside the great hall, the audience waited quietly, their eyes fixed on the grand piano placed right in the center of the shining wooden stage. The chairs were full, every seat taken. Important people, musicians, critics, fans, and even people who had never been to a concert before, they had all come for her. Behind the stage, in a quiet room, Emily sat alone. She wore a long, simple black dress. Her hair was tied back, and in her hands she held a folded piece of paper. It was old and a little wrinkled. On it was the last note her mother had written to her before she passed away. Emily had kept it. All these years, reading it whenever she needed courage. Tonight she read it one more time. "My dear Emily," the note said, "the world may forget many things, but it never forgets beauty born from truth. Play with your heart, and you'll never be alone." Emily closed her eyes, held the note close to her chest for a moment, then placed it carefully into her small bag. She stood up, took a breath, and walked toward the stage entrance. Everything felt like a dream. Just months ago, she was serving tables, living in a small apartment, trying to keep her family together. She had given up her dreams long ago. That single moment, when Charles Benton dared her to play the piano, had changed everything. Now she was standing at the edge of the world she once only imagined, as she stepped onto the stage. The audience stood up and clapped before she even touched the piano. Cameras clicked, people whispered her name. But Emily didn't look nervous. She looked calm, peaceful. This moment wasn't about fame. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about music. It was about remembering who she really was. She sat at the grand piano, closed her eyes for a few seconds, and then let her fingers touch the keys. The first notes were soft, gentle, like a whisper floating across the room. The crowd leaned in, drawn by the beauty in her touch. And as she continued, the music grew stronger, deeper. Her hands moved with grace, not just playing notes, but painting emotions. Every key she pressed told a part of her story, her mother's. Illness, the nights she cried alone, the times she wanted to give up, the dreams she buried, the love she never lost for music, the pain, the strength, the silence, the rebirth. The hall was so quiet you could hear breathing. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music carry them. Others had tears running down their cheeks. No one moved. No one spoke. In the front row sat Charles Benton, the man who had once made a playful dare that changed a life. He watched her with a proud smile. This wasn't just a performance. It was a moment of history, of something pure and real. Even he, a man used to power and money, felt small in front of what she created on that stage. Beside him sat Emily's younger brother and sister. They had dressed up for the concert, sitting tall, their eyes never leaving their sister. Remembered all the nights she cooked for them, helped with homework, skipped meals so they could eat, gave up her own dreams so they could chase theirs. Now they watched her shine. They watched her finally step into the light she had always deserved. Emily played without fear, without holding back, as if the piano was her voice, and through it, she was finally saying everything she had kept inside all these years. The piece ended with a long, soft note one that echoed through the hall and seemed to float in the air. Even after her fingers left the keys, she sat still for a moment. Then she slowly looked up, and the room exploded. Applause shook the walls. People stood up, cheering, clapping, crying. It wasn't just respect, it was love. A deep, honest love for the girl who had played with her soul. She stood and gave a small bow. Her eyes found her siblings, and they smiled at each other. She saw Charles and gave him a nod of thanks. Then she did something unexpected. She walked back to the piano, took the microphone that had been placed nearby, and began to speak. "I was never supposed to be here," she said softly. The room fell silent. "I was supposed to be forgotten. I worked as a waitress, and I thought that was all my life would be. I thought my time had passed. But then someone gave me a chance. Not a handout, not a shortcut, just a moment, small moment to remember who I was." She looked at the crowd, and then I remembered something my mother used to say. She said, "The world is loud, but music is louder if you play from the heart." That's what I did tonight. Played for her, for my family, for the girl I used to be. The audience was completely still. "So if there's anyone out there," she continued, "who feels like their dream is over, like they've missed their chance, like they've been forgotten, please believe me, you are not done. Sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you. Sometimes that person has to be you." With that, she smiled, bowed again, and walked off the stage. The applause continued behind her like waves crashing on the shore. Backstage, she hugged her siblings tightly. Her brother whispered, "You were amazing." Her sister wiped tears from her eyes. Mom would be so proud. Charles came in too, his eyes misty. "I knew it," he said. "From the very beginning. I knew the world needed to hear you." Emily looked at him. "Thank you for the dare," he laughed. "Best money I ever spent." That night, Emily didn't go to a fancy party or a red carpet. She went home with her family, ordered simple takeout, and sat on the floor of their living room, still in her concert dress, still feeling the music in her hands. They talked and laughed late into the night. For the first time in years, Emily felt full. Not because of the fame or the stage or the applause, but because she had come back to herself. She had found the path she thought she'd lost forever. In the days that followed, the world kept calling, more interviews, more offers. People wanted her story, her music, her time. But Emily didn't rush. She chose carefully. She accepted some offers, declined others. She promised herself that she would never lose the reason she played in the first place. And whenever she played, again whether for 5 people or 5,000, she always carried that same message. You are not too late. Your gift is still alive. Years later, she became a teacher as well as a performer. She helped other young musicians who had been forgotten or ignored. She gave them chances, just like someone had given her. Her students called her Miss Emily, and they loved her not just for her skill, but for her heart. In the corner of her classroom stood a grand piano, and above it, a small photo of her mother. On the wall beside it, a quote written in soft gold letters: "Music never leaves us. It waits inside, quiet and true." And so, Emily's music never stopped. It grew. It healed. It reached places she never thought it could. All because of one small dare, one forgotten piano, and a girl who found her voice again.